Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance's Crypto Roundup for Friday, November 7th, 2025. Ron Quaranta here with my dear friend David Brill and our favorite pet in the background. David, good to see you, buddy. It's been too long. We had to take the week last week. For everyone who's watching us on LinkedIn Live and X and YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. Before we begin, our usual disclaimers, obviously, please keep in mind that nothing David and I are discussing is investment or legal advice, and that really the things we talk about are our own personal perspectives, not necessarily the perspectives of our firms. David, we take one broadcast week off and the markets fall out of bed, as I texted you the other morning. What have you been seeing, buddy? What's been the week look like for you?
Well, I was in New York for Ripple Swell, which was really well attended, and kudos to the Ripple team. I thought that was really well handled and interesting to see. They're building out a whole suite of services, a robust custody offering, and so I think that's really interesting. I think they bought a prime brokerage, and so they're really trying to become like a financial hub, using the Ripple platform. So that was interesting. I mean, I think, we've seen October end, October ended and it was, definitely not Uptober.
Can we call it Downtober from now on?
We call it Downtober. I think a lot of people have been caught off sides with this sell-off, and it was a little surprising to me. And I think, this is sort of the rumblings. I think we talked about in one of the podcasts that like there may be some other tremors from that original sell-off that occurred, and I think we're seeing that now.
Yeah, David, it's a good point. And before we begin, I do want to address, I know some folks will reach out to us. Josh couldn't join us this week. She'll be back with us next week. Looking forward to seeing her. It's been a little bit. David, I'm with you, and I want to come back to Ripple a bit later on. I heard a lot of good things about the event. I didn't get a chance to go. But, I was thinking about something earlier this week. For the past several weeks, you and I have been talking about, resistance and support levels, particularly for BTC. And I distinctly remember you and I saying, we've got to hold 120. So we got to hold 115. We got to hold 110. And when I saw us approaching 100K on BTC and I saw these outflows, I thought, this doesn't look good. I mean, we're bouncing around 100, 101, give or take. And I asked you a question. I'd love your thoughts about it. I've got some perspectives. Is this a rotation play? And the reason I'm bringing that up is we're seeing some old balances, whales, moving some stuff. And in the past, that would have been, oh my God, the whales are moving. They're selling. It's the apocalypse. I don't think that's the case, but I'd love your perspectives on it.
I think this is a distribution play. And, a number of people have talked about this, but I think, you have these whales who've owned it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Look, it's 100,000 is a big round number.
Yeah.
And look, if we were fortunate enough to have billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, at some point you're going to need to take some off the table. And I think around this level, they decided like this was a level that they wanted to take some off the table, and you can't blame people for that. Like, so I don't think it's, awful. I just think that because expectations were higher, like a lot of people just thought this fourth quarter we'd run up to like 150 or 160. That's why it hurts a little more.
As my wife told me earlier this week, David, the holiday season's coming up. Why not sell off some stuff and buy some gifts? I'm not selling anything. Just as an aside, David. It's interesting as you talk about that as well. I wonder how much of this is related to. I've been thinking about catalysts a lot, right? You and I talked about this in the virtual green room. There's the government shutdown that continues to go on now, the longest in U.S. history. I think 39 days. I could be wrong. And we're beginning to see those effects. Again, politics aside, there are people not getting paid. SNAP benefits will not be paid. I think there's some court decisions pending. It has real world effects. So I think catalysts like that make it risk off across the board. But I also wonder, you and I talked about this as well. All eyes are on interest rates. We don't have government information being reported, but we do have Fed Chair Powell press conference after the last quarter point decrease saying, I'm paraphrasing, nothing's guaranteed. And that just pulled the legs out from under the crypto market, and it almost felt like a little too much. What are your thoughts about how dependent we are on kind of the words of people in public life?
Well, look, people really thought we are going to get another rate cut, and weaker dollar is better for crypto. So
Yeah.
that was unexpected. I think the government shutdown's been unexpected,
Hmm.
and totally my personal view, but I would just like to see a clean CR passed and move forward, and then some of these other issues being tackled, and it's really I don't want to say that one political party is trying to take advantage of the situation here,
Yeah.
but like these are our fellow citizens, and
Yeah.
look, people are going to work and not getting paid, and you know it's an inequitable situation, and it's really unfortunate. And so
Yeah.
my hope is maybe over the weekend they're meeting again, that we can get this squared away, but
Yeah.
I can't see any meaningful upside until we get this resolved.
Politics is a cynical, cynical business, my friend. And the more you and I talk to people about it, the uglier it sounds. Shout out to Adam Goldberg and Dina Ellis and all of our policy experts in DC and around the country. I don't know how they do it, David. It's just so cynical reading some of the things that we see.
I think it's fascinating. It's like literally how the sausage is made. But one good thing is that we are making progress on market structure. I mean, I know there's been meetings, there've been conversations. Um, I don't think that has ground to a halt, and I think there's been dialogue on that. So maybe we see something positive on that front.
And so on that point, though, because we've spoken to colleagues in this space about that, as well as some colleagues in DC. We're not lobbyists, David, as we often say, but the longer the government shutdown lasts, the more stuff gets taken off the table in my mind between now and the end of the year. I think we've got a recess coming up. At some point, they're going to run out of room to
Yeah.
get some of the stuff everyone wants done, particularly market structure legislation. David, I think there's a real chance that we don't get market structure legislation before the end of the year. I think we might get it early next year, but do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember at the summit, I was saying that, like, you had asked me, or somebody had asked me, like, when do I think we'd see it? And I said, I just don't see it happening this year.
Yeah.
Like, I want it to happen this year, but I don't see it happening this year. So look, I think we need to also have some, balance here. We are at 100K on Bitcoin, and the total market cap is still in a, crypto market cap still in a decent place. So and like I think getting the stablecoin bill done has done a lot of good. I'm working on a few real world asset
Yeah.
transactions right now, and talking to a bank that's thinking about how do they want to implement stablecoin. So there's a lot of progress being made. It's just not going as quickly as we would like.
Yeah, agreed. And for everyone out there who's watching, David was the ultimate trooper at our event, at our blockchain, crypto and blockchain summit. He stood in for me. David, again, thank you as always for moderating that panel. And for everyone who's asked me, the glamour shots of David will be publicly available. David will have them on the website. We'll publicize them over LinkedIn and Twitter soon. David, I wanted to talk a little bit about, the backdrop of everything we're discussing, from interest rates to the politics of what's going on in DC to kind of stalled legislation. It hasn't just impacted crypto, and I've been spending a lot of time trying to look at the macro picture. And I've said this to you before, and I keep saying it, and I'm looking for someone to tell me if they disagree.
Mm.
This is a very odd market. And the reason I say it's an odd market, I hear a lot of people comparing it to, the AI boom and stuff compared to internet. And
Mm.
it's very frothy. These are ridiculous prices. These are ridiculous multiples. I would argue, though, that it is a different world. I mean, these companies have earnings. We're seeing earnings expectations being beaten a good chunk of the time. Corporate balance sheets are pretty darn good, relatively speaking. We've got good growth. So there's an underswell of there's real economic activity happening here. And then you look at consumer sentiment is at, like, a 4-year low or something, and the markets are bottoming out. David, why this kind of dichotomy?
I think that companies are doing well,
Yeah.
but are individuals doing well? And I think maybe, well, obviously, government employees are being impacted.
Yeah.
But I think there's a question of whether, you know, let's say workers under like 75K, are they worse off? Are they the
Mm,
same off? Or are they? So I think there's some of that that's going on. But look, it's hard to have good consumer sentiment when the government shut down.
fair.
Like who's going to be like, oh, we're in a great peace of mind right now, or government
Right.
shut down. So I'm not sort of thrown by that number.
Hmm.
There were a lot of layoffs in October, which was a little, concerning. But I think that, ultimately, I think that the economy is doing well. And this is very different than the internet bubble because we have real companies that have real products
Yeah.
that, charge revenue and are actually like making things and earning money.
Yeah.
So I look at these, like, I think if your thesis is that, you're bullish on certain parts of the economy, this is an opportunity to get some things that you like at a discount.
Yeah. And David, I want to, for the audience, and again, you and I talk about this a lot. These are human problems as well. I mean, we often hear in the business news this is kind of a K-shaped recovery where those who are doing well are doing really well or continue to do well. Those who are not doing great are doing worse, and those are kind of disparities that really need to be broadly addressed. So, David, it brings us to the question: if we're looking at interest rate cuts, will that be the thing that helps elevate everyone in the economy? And do we get another one before the end of the year? Do we go back to risk on later on this year?
I think we likely rally once the government goes back in session.
Okay.
Um, and I also think that, look, another 25 basis points would be helpful.
Hmm.
Look, the interest rates to buy houses are still high, prices are still high. And so that needs to sort of recalibrate. But look, I think the mantra that we've always had are like in our spaces, builders keep building.
Yeah.
Um, there are more use cases developing, and I think the story that's underreported is just that the altcoins have just not. They have been really continuously getting really beaten up.
Hmm.
And I guess, the question is, are we going to see a rally at some point in the altcoins? Because I think people have been waiting a long, long time for that.
Yeah. And David, for everyone in the audience, again, real quickly, thank you so much for joining us. If you've got questions for David or I, please put it in the chat. LinkedIn or X will respond to it as quickly as we can. David, we've been having the alts conversation for a long time. You've been waiting for alt summer, and that has not materialized. And in my mind, there's this real break between what I'll call the stalwart cryptos, right? Call it BTC, call it ETH, call it SOL, whatever it may be, and the variety of alts that are out there. Some of them really got pummeled. What's the catalyst keeping the alts, under pressure?
Well, I mean, there's two questions. One is liquidity,
Yeah.
and the other is, are these digital asset treasury IPOs,
Mm,
are they taking liquidity from the altcoins, and is that going to the digital asset treasury companies? And
right.
so, I mean, I will say though that I've read that one of the Solana ETFs has been doing pretty well.
Hmm.
Um, but we saw one of the digital asset treasury companies sell Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and I think they sold half their holdings. And it makes you wonder how well that company is managing their holdings. That in a
Hmm.
small sort of downturn, like they need to sell half of theirs. But
Yeah.
I haven't studied them at length, but I think that doesn't send a positive sign either.
I mean, this comes back to the operating model conversation, David, that you and I have had
Yeah.
many, many times. And I saw some news. I won't name names of the companies, but there's a DATCO out there looking to buy more BTC by borrowing against their BTC holdings to buy more BTC. And that to me is just kind of layers upon layers of risk within a particular operating model. And David, it makes me ask the other question, and you alluded to this a bit earlier. In the wake of that, is liquidity drying up? Because if it is, in my mind, some of the DATCOs are the first things to get whacked.
I don't think the liquidity is getting. I think people may be a little more cautious, but I don't think the liquidity is drying up.
Hmm.
I just think because look, I think there are more and more people who are now allocating towards crypto.
Yeah.
I think the question is it being allocated to Bitcoin and maybe Ether and not to the rest?
Yeah. Or arguably, is it being allocated to Bitcoin or Ether ETFs
Yes.
and not DATCOs
Yeah.
holding ETF, which is an interesting argument.
And also, look, I still think it's hard to price these DATCOs.
Yeah, I'm with you because the standard model of, discounted cash flows or anything like that just doesn't NPV doesn't work for a DATCO in my mind.
Yeah. And also, I think figuring that asset value isn't always easy for some of these too. Because they could raise money and they have Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but you just don't know like what price did they pay for it and
Yeah.
how much cash they have on their balance. Like, you don't really see that in real time.
Right.
And
Right.
those are hard to, I mean, and look, basically what you're seeing is with the DATCOs is they go public, they go up really high at the beginning, they sell off a lot, and then, then they either stay flat or kind of keep going down, or then, some may rally.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm not negative on them. I'm just saying that, like,
Agreed.
I think it's just harder to value them.
Well, there becomes a bit of a mania around everyone suddenly needs to become a DATCO. That kind of dilutes the proposition. David, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm going to wonk out on you, but maybe you and I should pull out the old Corp Fin books, corporate finance, not Corp Fin, from a regulatory perspective, folks, and figure out what these companies' weighted average costs of capital are
Yeah.
if they're borrowing to buy BTC and borrowing against the BTC to do it.
No, I think that's a great point. Like, are you earning more than your cost of capital?
Right.
And look, the DATCOs have to do a little better because not only do they have to, um, perform well, but they need to be operating businesses. So
Yeah.
basically, they have to beat their weighted average cost of capital and then be able to pay for all their operating costs.
Right. Right, exactly. And for our friend Sonia out there, before she messages me, I am not planning a Shiba Dat. Don't worry about it, David. You mentioned a couple of things, and we've been talking about it. I saw the news earlier. I think it was yesterday. It's all becoming a blur. So Kathy Wood was in the news, and she had noted she's for a long time has had a price target for BTC of 1.5 million by 2030. She's pulled that into 1.2 million. Which doesn't sound like a lot to the everyday player, but as you and I look at that and think that's a pretty big discount off her original estimate. And the argument was because of stablecoins. That question for me is a different question because it really becomes what's the use case conversation for BTC. Do you agree with her kind of price target there and the argument about why that was pulled in?
Well, look, Kathy Wood's been successful and she has a lot of assets under management. So
Big fan.
I'm not gonna, I won't question her, thought process and analysis,
Yes.
but yeah, I'm not there with 1.2 million in 2030.
Too high?
What'd you say?
Too
Yes,
high.
I think it's too high. I mean, look, people are still very bullish, and I'm still very bullish, but I try and sort of keep a very rational sort of view. And like we were talking about, end of year prices, and I said,
Yeah.
I did not see like 200K and things like that. But look, I don't think Bitcoin is morphing into a currency that people are going to use. I think it's going to be a store of value.
Mm.
But if national currencies get more and more devalued, and this, and Bitcoin holds its value,
Mm-hmm.
look, I could see things being denominated in Bitcoin in some places, which I think is really interesting.
David, you know what? It's funny you raise that, and I'll share a quick story with you. My wife and I had dinner with some friends here in New Jersey. These people, very smart, very nice people, have no affiliation, knowledge at all of Bitcoin. They live in a very, very different world. So, of course, shockingly, they had asked me, and I described Bitcoin and the markets that you and I have been looking at for the better part of a decade now. And the comment was, "Oh, so it's like gold." And it struck me that people are perceiving it as that store of value. As I explained to them what's been happening in the marketplace, the BTC as a payments layer, is that dead, David, in the long term?
I don't know. It's interesting. Like, obviously, we
It's
need
not
to.
playing out, right?
What'd you say?
It's not playing out that way, correct?
No, and we also need to fix our tax structure because if you're going to use it as a payment mechanism, you can't. Nobody's going to pay tax. Well, people have a very hard time figuring out basis on small transactions using Bitcoin.
Yes.
I think that's a lot to ask of people.
Yeah.
So I
There
think
shouldn't
that's
be there shouldn't be tax consequences for a frappuccino, is what you're saying.
no,
Paid.
no. And like I think people will be well intentioned, but I don't think they'll get their taxes right if that's continues to be the case.
Yeah. And David, that bears out. Like so many of our colleagues and members are in the accounting profession. We have an accounting working group, as you know, and a lot of the conversation is how do taxes get reported and recognized? How is this done properly? The sheer volume of data on behalf of clients and the use cases aren't even fully vetted out yet, is really driving our accounting friends a bit crazy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I also think that stable coins will take that role.
Right.
I think banks are looking to incorporate stable coins, and you know, I think you have Tether's going to have a U.S. stable coin. Ripple's US stablecoin is gathering momentum, and you have USDC, and I mean that is a more logical use case for buying like small everyday things.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
thing I am really curious about is, we're looking at everything, but meanwhile, Ether is like, is 33% away from a all time high.
Yeah.
All time high was around 5K, and I saw some chart on X this morning, and ETH is the same price it was last year, and
Right, right. And David, when we look at the impacts of this, we talk about Bitcoin prices, ETH prices as well. Like a lot of air has been taken out of the markets broadly. 2 weeks ago, you and I were talking about gold. If we're going to talk about, like stores of value, gold was at 4,400. I think we're below 4,000 now. So a
yeah,
lot of air has been taken out of some markets. And I'm just going to say it. I don't think that's arguably a bad thing. I think it reprices things more sanely, if that makes sense.
yeah. But look, I think what it is showing though is that people are concerned about their national currencies,
Yeah.
and look, we have a big debt. I mean, we do need to tackle this at some point. Like,
Yeah.
it's taking up so much of our, you know, we'll call it free cash flow in the U.S. It's taking up, to pay the interest on the debt.
Yeah. I
I mean,
mean, interest on the debt alone is, if I recall correctly, now exceeds the entirety of the defense budget.
yeah. I
It's
mean, and we're not going to just be able to reset.
no. But there is an argument, and I'm just going to say it, politics aside, that there's no political will or interest in paying down the debt. Right? The argument will be we'll grow our way out of debt, which is not a great long-term argument.
It feels hard to see how we grow out of a $37 trillion debt.
Yeah.
Um, However, if we did have lower interest rates and we could, refinance our debt cheaply,
mhm.
that could help. So I
Yeah.
understand that, analysis and logic, but yeah.
I, you could also look at it from the perspective of we can inflate our way out of the debt, as inflation, if we're going to look at long-term, R star inflation or whatever the metric is above 3%, inflated dollars are always a bit easier way for the government to pay down debt.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see inflation go much higher than 3%.
Agreed. Fully agree with you.
Yeah. And I think 3% is probably the new norm, even though nobody's willing to come out and say it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to see that. But I do think I want to go back to the ETH and altcoins for a minute, because
Yeah,
I
go for it.
think that's like it's a bit of an underreported story, because if you think about it, the majority of our ecosystem, I mean, obviously Bitcoin's the big
Hmm.
player from a market value perspective, but the majority of our ecosystem are different tokens and other protocols, and those have continued to get hit. And I think one of the things that's been going on is this issue with DeFi. So I don't know if you want to talk about what's been going on with some of the DeFi protocols.
Kick it off. It's worth having the conversation, particularly because more and more institutions that we talk to, David, and you know this, and I know this, have been asking or trying to understand how they get plugged into DeFi and what's the best way to do it. Go ahead, kick us off, bud.
Yeah, look, I mean, Stream Finance had like $87 million that they can't account for. Balancer is having issues, and I think Compound is having issues, and so sort of the DeFi ecosystem, is kind of locking up right now as they're trying to sort this out. And obviously, Ether's paying the price for that, and some of these protocols are. But
Yeah.
you know, it's really hard because we want this to be very free markets, and we want it to be not.
Mhm.
You know, we want things to work as they were developed to be. But I do hear more calls for circuit breakers and for other things, and we talked about a little this about this at the summit. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, Ron. Like, you know, are you where do you fall in this discourse?
This is a hard one for me because I'm with you from the I don't want to call it libertarian, but I think people or organizations should be able to buy what they want to buy as long as they're able to withstand the consequences of those decisions. But the more I look at DeFi, it makes me ask two questions. One is, yeah, I was viscerally opposed when we were talking about circuit breakers. It
Yeah,
just really, really irked me from the perspective of the ethos of what we're trying to accomplish if we look at DeFi. And you and I are not crypto anarchists by any stretch, right? But if there's going to be a DeFi market, make it a DeFi market and make it available for those organizations or people who can manage it. But it makes me wonder actually about something you said, and you've said many times, user experience. And
yeah,
maybe circuit breakers are part of a DeFi experience for some segment of the ecosystem. And if industry comes together to enable that, I think that's a better thing than simply regulation that tries to prohibit it, if that makes sense.
yeah.
There is one other thing I'll add to this, which is a market dynamics item, David, because if we're looking at liquidity locking up in DeFi a little bit, I mean, look, there are parts of the DeFi world that are really risky, right? And things are happening where people are like, oh my God, we didn't even realize double digit millions disappeared in value. That being said, why isn't that liquidity rotating out of DeFi and into centralized exchanges or think, BTC or ETH?
I think part of it is because it's locked up right now.
Yeah,
and
fair. Okay, fair.
part of it's unaccounted
But
for.
but you'd imagine some portion
Yeah,
of the percentage that's not locked up would be like, I'm out. Let me go where I can get some safer yield.
yeah. I mean, and also this brings up a bigger problem of, uh, you know, for people who aren't that familiar with the space,
Yeah,
we have a problem of, you know, how do you tell people who aren't that familiar with the space that, oh, just go and
right.
well, play in this area where maybe they're better off having an ETF, but that's not the whole ethos of why crypto was created in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's a very weird dynamic, and it's something we still have to sort of figure out.
Which brings me to a kind of an almost philosophic question that I've been thinking about, David, which is I'll call it trading crypto, but broadly, crypto may not be for everyone. And I think that's something that gets lost in the conversation because a lot of the use cases for a long time have been it'll be payments rails and everyone will be involved in crypto. And that might be true. It might be true because of ETFs. It might be true um, because of retirement plans, for example. But there's got to be a level of self awareness about what people get involved with. And I'm bringing up another conversation with different friends that we've had, and I had a couple of people who were again not involved in the industry you and I are involved in say, "Hey, Ron, what's that crypto I can buy? I remember from a few years back, people were spending $1,000 and getting $1 million. What is that next crypto? That's not a real world."
Yeah, and there are very few people actually did that. I mean,
Yeah,
look, there is a cohort that bought Bitcoin, $1,000 or less, who bought Ether for $1,000 or less, and
yeah,
Ether's case seen like a 30x, and Bitcoin, what, a 10,000x or a 1,000x or
yeah,
100x. But I think for the most part, a lot of those days are over.
yeah.
I think there are 3 to 10x is still out there,
Hmm.
but I think that a lot of that craziness is kind of over.
And that's not a bad thing. And the reason that's not a bad thing, David, in my mind, tell me if you agree or disagree, is that means a greater pool of people globally can participate.
Yeah, and look, I think there are a lot of really good projects. I think that are a little under the radar.
Yep.
Like, we've talked about sort of like different segments that I think are under the radar, and so there continue to be. And I just think that once we get a little more clarity here,
Hmm.
you know, as long as people feel like they can come to the US and talk about their product, build things, and actually use them here,
Yeah.
and not have the fear of some, retribution, I think that,
Right.
we could really see all these great use cases playing out.
Yeah, and David, we have, I'm sure you do as well. I have these conversations regularly with colleagues overseas who ask, "What's the best way to come back to the U.S.? Where do we locate? What's the use case? How do we build?" Builders keep building, David, and I think it's an important part of the conversation. I think, David, I wanted to ask also. I've been thinking about this a lot. When we look at stable coins, which in the original theory were meant to and designed to minimize the volatility because they're pegged to an underlying, often USD, often Treasury. So we have huge balances now, Tether and these other stable coins, and of course, I won't mention the organization, but certain banking organizations really don't like stable coins, and I'm trying to understand the why. Is it simply because they're trying to protect the franchise of banking? I mean, the argument that they're too risky, no one should be involved is answered because of stablecoins in many regards. And now it's terrible. You shouldn't touch these things anyway.
Well, look, I think on one hand, the banks like it because, they can use collateral more
Sure.
efficiently.
Yep.
But look, it does cut into their profit margins. Look, I don't know what the the going rate is for checking account interest, but or savings account, but it's like 0.3% or I
Yeah.
don't know. And look, if people can get, right now, and I'm not, you know, I'm only using this as an example, but I think on Coinbase you get 4.5% for holding USDC. That's
Yeah.
meaningful. That's what 20x what you could get in a regular checking account. You don't have
Yep.
FDIC insurance, and that's a risk.
Yep.
But, I could see people holding, I don't know, let's say they had $20,000. If they wanted to have 10,000 getting 4.25% and 10 getting 0.25%,
Yep.
they might do that. So I think the banks don't like the additional competition. That's what it
I,
feels like.
and I think it is still astounding to me that there are certain very large banks in the United States who advertise something like, "Hey, and if you deposit, call it 500,000 or something, you can get 0.5% instead of 0.25%." Why would anyone do that?
I mean, companies may be required to be in like really safe accounts, and so
Fair.
much of a choice. Maybe they can own some money markets that are,
Drop it in a CD.
yeah, like basically, they can't own other things. Like
Yeah.
that's just, but look, I mean, it would be nice if there was more competitive interest for people
Agreed.
with accounts, and I think that's a part of it that they don't like.
Yeah. And I think the other part that they don't like, and again, not speaking about any particular bank, but I think the concept of banking is evolving, David. And I'm thinking about, I don't want to call them neobanks, but when you look at what Robinhood's doing, when you look at what some of these other players are doing, it's crypto, it's equities, it's prediction markets, it's deposits getting paid 3 to 4%. It almost feels like the capability of everything from a financial markets perspective. Is that the future of financial markets or not? What do you think?
I mean, I think it is, but we also need to be fair to banks that they can't just pivot into new areas
Yep.
like without going through a whole. They're audited, they're regulated. They can't just like, okay, we want to offer prediction markets. There's a process. But I will give you an example. Look, Schwab was out there, I think, yesterday on CNBC saying that people are really embracing crypto and they have a big market share. They were saying
Yeah.
on their platform. So I think it's coming. I don't think it has to be totally competitive to banks. I think they have opportunities to white label and do other things. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it is taking away some of the free lunch that they've gotten. And look, it still costs, I don't know, unless you have a special account, $50+ to wire internationally, and there's still correspondent banks that could still take multiple days to just get money moved, where we can move value, almost in real time.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves, David. We're coming up on time. We're keeping it a tight 30 something minutes today. I've been thinking about something you said as well, because I'm seeing more and more interest, and we can take it up on a separate broadcast this concept, and we've talked about the alts, but things like social tokens, for
Yeah.
example, thinking more and more about the evolution of gaming tokens and how they interplay with the real world. David, I agree with you. I think 2026 is going to be an even better year simply because I think some of the big players open up their space and their franchise to crypto for clients. But what are we talking about when we look at social tokens or when we look at gaming tokens? Is that a, hey, come back in 20 years and they'll be part of the ecosystem? Or what's your thought about that?
No, I really believe, I think there just needs to be a model that's been proven out.
Yeah.
But I really believe that, there will be social tokens and there will be, tokens, yeah, like fan clubs and things like that. And I think there's a great use case for it. It just has to be proven out a little more.
Yeah.
Look, like when you look at a meme coin, it's not that the intrinsic value of whatever that cartoonish looking is. It's about the community. And if
Right.
there's a way to like create a community and monetize it and create revenue from that community,
Yeah.
you have a business there.
Right.
And look, look, people are trading Pokemon cards. People are trading, all these different things. And what is it? There's a community of Pokemon folks
Hmm.
who value certain cards and are willing to pay extra for them.
Yeah.
I don't totally get it, but it's a scarcity thing, and look, more power to them.
Yeah. And we don't have to get it, David. I mean, the truth of the matter is you can make a market in almost anything.
Yeah, and so, and look with crypto, like there's some great projects. We've been trying not to call out specific projects, but I mean, at some point, maybe we should talk about projects we think that have real world use cases and that I think that add value to society. And we don't need to talk about their price or anything, but just that they do interesting things. And I think look, if there was a token, for instance, let's say with clinical trials, if there
Right.
was a way to do clinical trials on the blockchain and you could buy a token and participate in that by sharing your data,
Hmm.
you or your doctor would get access to the aggregated data. Like
Hmm.
that's a neat idea. Like that's a helpful idea. So I really think there are a number of good projects out there. I just think that because there's so many altcoins, it's hard to get like above the noise and get attention.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting point, David. To that point, I've been kind of trying to keep up with this idea of crowdsourcing science
Yeah.
or crowdsourcing research, and I wonder how much of that evolves because of some tokenization that enables a use case that remunerates people to properly contribute to the work that's happening there. I agree with you. I think it's an important conversation. I think outside of all of the hyperbole, again, there's still a lot of work being done behind the scenes, and I think a lot of it's important work.
Yeah. One other thing I thought that was interesting is when I was at the Ripple Swell, they had the announcement that they got a investment at a $40 billion valuation.
Yeah.
And one thing that's interesting is that the market cap of XRP is like I think double that.
Hmm.
So it just makes you wonder how is that being valued? How did those investors value Ripple? And I just thought that was an interesting thought.
Yeah, valuation conversations in the world that you and I operate in to me are endlessly fascinating because almost every one of those conversations I approach with, how did you get to that number? Like I just like you try to piece together the calculus of it, and sometimes I just don't understand.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, and we're seeing more crypto companies go public. I think one thing we might want to do in the next couple of sessions
Yeah.
is like look at their stock prices, like where they IPO'd, and see where they are now. Maybe we
Yeah.
can do that and have a look at that because I
And
think it's helpful.
yeah, it makes me wonder how many of them it's probably worth charting in the aggregate those DATCOs and the curve towards or away from NAV.
Yeah,
It'd be interesting to see what that mechanics looks like.
yeah, and also for like the crypto companies themselves that have gone public to see, some of the exchanges have gone public,
Yeah.
Circle's gone public. I think it'd be interesting to like take a view and see how those have done.
Yep. David, comment from our old friend Greg Murphy, Citi CEO, discussed stablecoins quite well in this interview on CNBC today. We'll take a look at it. Greg, thanks so much calling in or commenting in from Toronto. Good to hear from you. Buddy, David, let's wrap it up. It's a busy week coming up. I know. Let's hopefully the government shutdown ends soon. We are deep in the midst. I'm looking at the data and the calendar now of planning our holiday event. David, in New York City, I know you've got the Gulf Stream occasionally coming out of Florida. Careful flying into LaGuardia. I know some of the flights have been postponed and they're doing less volume, but looking like early December. We'll keep you posted. I'm going to ask one off-topic question, David. I think I know how you'd answer this, but I'd love to hear it. $1 trillion pay packages, for or against?
Look, the shareholders voted for it. Elon's one of a kind. Look, he's got a lot of targets he's got to meet to make that pay package. So I'm a supporter.
I am as well. I get it that some friends have come back to me and said, but he's a horrible human being. You don't know him. You may disagree with some of his positions, but understand what's going on.
I'm with you. People, look, people get reported on in ways that you can take nibbles of kernels of truth and then like report something in a certain way. We don't know him personally. Look, like he's accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
The shareholders have had plenty of disclosure and time to talk about it and had tons of pundits talk about it on both sides, pro and con. And you know what? It was 75% of the shareholders approved it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at the targets, David, for that, these are phenomenal, like go for the moon targets. Like 20, I'm just totally making up numbers. I don't remember what they were specifically, but like, having 10 million robots active, having 20 million Teslas out there that are autonomous. I mean, these are really hard goals.
Yeah.
It's not like they handed them a bucket of $1 trillion.
Yeah. And look, this is how the capital markets work.
Yeah.
Shareholders, they get an ability to vote on a pay package and, it was approved. So, from that side of things, I support it.
I'm putting forward to the WSBA board a $1 trillion pay package. I assume it will get voted down immediately, David. David, buddy, good to see you. Shout out to our friend Josh Clayman. Looking forward to seeing her next week. For everyone who joined us, thank you so much. Greg, thanks for the comment. If we missed anything you want to cover, info@wsba.co. We will cover it next week. We'll leave it there. Have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.